The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the general store just as the first snowflakes began to fall. And through the frosted window, Ethan Edwards saw her stumble out into the bitter cold, wearing nothing but a thin cotton dress, and tears streaming down her face like tiny rivers of pure heartbreak. He had been loading supplies onto his wagon when the coach arrived, its horses snorting white clouds into the December air. The year was 1878, and Salida, Colorado had seen its share of desperate souls passing through on their way to somewhere better. But something about this woman made Ethan drop the sack of flour he was holding and start moving toward her before his mind even registered the decision. She collapsed to her knees in the snow, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and ancient inside her chest. Ethan was 26 years old, tall and broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, with hands that were calloused and strong but could be gentle when they needed to be. He reached her side just as she tried to stand again, her legs giving out beneath her like a newborn calf. Without thinking, he caught her, one arm sliding around her waist while the other steadied her elbow. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and calm the way it got when he was gentling a spooked horse. "I have got you." She looked up at him with eyes the color of amber whiskey, and he felt something shift in his chest like a door, opening that he had not even known was closed. Her dark hair was plastered to her face with melting snow and tears, and her lips were blue from the cold. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, young but with the kind of exhaustion in her features that spoke of having lived through more than her years should have required. "I have nowhere to go," she whispered, and her voice cracked on the last word. "He threw me out. My husband, he said I was barren and worthless and he did not want to see my face again." Ethan felt anger flare hot in his gut, but he kept his expression neutral. "What is your name?" "Rebecca," she said. "Rebecca Morris." He reached up with his free hand and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks, then brushed the snow from her hair with careful fingers. When he spoke, the words came from somewhere honest and true inside him, a place he usually kept locked away from the world. "Welcome home, my love." She blinked at him, confusion flickering across her features. "What?" "You have got somewhere to go now," he said simply. "My ranch, it is not much, but it is warm and there is food and a bed. You can stay as long as you need." "You do not even know me," Rebecca said, but she was not pulling away from him. If anything, she seemed to be leaning into his warmth, her body recognizing what it needed even if her mind was still catching up. "I know enough," Ethan said. He shrugged out of his heavy sheepskin coat and draped it around her shoulders, not caring that the snow immediately started soaking through his wool shirt. "I know that any man who would turn a woman out in weather like this is not worth the air he breathes. And I know that you need help right now, and I am offering it." She studied his face for a long moment, searching for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because she gave a small nod. "Just for a few days," she said, "until I can figure out what to do next." "Sure," Ethan said, even though he was already thinking about how he could convince her to stay longer than that. "Just a few days." He helped her up into the wagon seat, then went back to finish loading his supplies while Rebecca sat huddled in his coat, watching him with those amber eyes. The general store owner, a portly man named Harold Simmons, came out onto the porch and gave Ethan a meaningful look. "That is Tom Morris's wife," Harold said quietly. "He came through here 3 days ago, said he was heading back east without her." "Ex-wife, sounds like," Ethan said, heaving another sack into the wagon bed. "Tom Morris has a mean streak in him," Harold continued. "I heard he hit her more than once, blamed her for not giving him children, like that is something a woman can control all by herself." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Good riddance to him then." Harold nodded slowly. "You are a good man, Ethan Edwards. Your folks would be proud of the way you turned out." The mention of his parents sent a familiar ache through Ethan's chest. They had died 4 years ago, his mother from pneumonia and his father from a broken heart 6 months later, leaving Ethan alone on the ranch they had built together. He finished loading the wagon in silence, then climbed up beside Rebecca and took the reins. The ride out to the ranch took nearly an hour through the falling snow. Rebecca did not say much, just sat there shivering despite the heavy coat. Ethan kept stealing glances at her, taking in the delicate line of her jaw, the way her eyelashes were dark and long against her pale cheeks, the small scar above her right eyebrow that made him wonder what story lay behind it. "How long were you married?" he asked finally, needing to break the silence. 2 years, Rebecca said softly. "We met in Kansas City. He seemed kind at first, respectful, but after the wedding he changed. Or maybe he just stopped pretending to be someone he was not. Did he hurt you?" She was quiet for so long that Ethan thought she might not answer. Then she pulled up the sleeve of her dress, revealing a pattern of bruises in various stages of healing, some yellow-green and fading, others still purple-black and fresh. "He said it was my fault," she said, "that I made him angry. That if I could just give him a son, everything would be different." Ethan's hands tightened on the reins until his knuckles went white. "It was not your fault," he said firmly. "A real man does not lay hands on a woman, ever. I do not care what the reason is." Rebecca looked at him with surprise, as if kindness was a language she had forgotten how to understand. "You really believe that?" "My father never once raised his hand to my mother in all their years together," Ethan said. "He told me that the measure of a man is not in his strength, but in how he uses it. That power without gentleness is just cruelty in a different name. Your father sounds like he was a good man." "He was the best man I ever knew," Ethan said quietly. "I try to live up to his example every day, though I fall short more often than not." They crested a small hill, and the ranch came into view below them. It was modest but well-maintained, with a sturdy 2-story house painted white with green shutters, a large barn, a chicken coop, and several corrals where horses stood with their backs to the wind. Smoke curled from the chimney, and warm light glowed in the windows. "It is beautiful," Rebecca said, and there was something like hunger in her voice, a longing for the kind of home and safety that the ranch represented. "It needs a woman's touch," Ethan said. "I have been managing on my own, but there are things I just do not notice or think about. The curtains are falling apart, and I cannot remember the last time I properly cleaned the place." He pulled the wagon up to the house and helped Rebecca down, noticing how light she felt, as if she had not been eating properly. He made a mental note to feed her something substantial as soon as they got inside. The front door was unlocked, as it always was. Ethan did not believe in living his life in fear, and besides, there was not much crime out this way. Most folks were too busy trying to survive to bother stealing from their neighbors. The inside of the house was warm from the fire he had left burning in the hearth that morning. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a big stone fireplace taking up most of one wall, a wooden table and chairs in the center, and a cast iron stove in the corner. Stairs led up to the second floor where the bedrooms were. It was clean enough, Ethan supposed, though he could see dust on the mantelpiece and cobwebs in the corners that he had been ignoring for months. "Sit down by the fire," he said, gesturing to one of the chairs he had pulled close to the hearth. "I will make some coffee and get you something to eat." Rebecca obeyed without argument, sinking into the chair and holding her hands out to the flames. Ethan busied himself at the stove, putting coffee on to boil and slicing bread and cheese. He had some leftover stew from the night before, which he heated up in a pot. The domesticity of it felt strange and right at the same time, having someone to take care of, someone to feed and warm and shelter. When he brought the food over to her, Rebecca looked up at him with tears in her eyes again. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked. "You do not know anything about me." Ethan crouched down so he was at eye level with her. "I know that you are hurting," he said. "And I know that I have the means to help, so I am helping. It does not need to be more complicated than that." "Most men would expect something in return," Rebecca said quietly, and there was a wariness in her expression that made Ethan's heart hurt. "I am not most men," he said. "You will stay in my parents' old room upstairs. It has a lock on the inside of the door if that makes you feel safer. You will eat 3 meals a day and rest and heal. When you are ready, if you want to help around the ranch, I would not say no to the assistance, but it is not required. You are a guest here, Rebecca. Nothing more and nothing less." She searched his face again, and whatever she saw there made her shoulders finally relax. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know what I did to deserve this kindness, but thank you." "Everyone deserves kindness," Ethan said simply. He handed her the bowl of stew and a spoon. "Now eat. You look like you have not had a proper meal in days." She ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger, finishing the entire bowl and 2 slices of bread. Ethan watched her with satisfaction, glad to see color starting to return to her cheeks. When she was done, he showed her upstairs to the bedroom that had belonged to his parents. It was the nicest room in the house, with a big bed covered in a wedding ring quilt his mother had made, lace curtains on the windows, and a dresser with a mirror above it. "I will bring up some water so you can wash," Ethan said. "And I will see if I can find some of my mother's old clothes for you. You are about the same size, I think." "I could not possibly wear your mother's things," Rebecca protested. "She would want you to," Ethan said firmly. "My mother never could stand to see someone in need go without. It would make her happy, knowing her things were being used to help someone." He left Rebecca alone and went back downstairs, heating water on the stove and carrying it up in a large pitcher along with a basin and some towels. Then he went to his own room and opened the trunk at the foot of his bed, where he had stored his mother's belongings after she died. He had not been able to bring himself to get rid of anything, even though keeping it all felt like pressing on a bruise. He selected several dresses, a nightgown, underthings, and a warm shawl, laying them carefully on the bed in his parents' room while Rebecca stood by the window looking out at the snow. She had taken off his coat and was hugging herself, looking small and lost. "The water is warm," Ethan said gently. "Take your time. I will be downstairs if you need anything." He left her there and went back down to unload the wagon and tend to the horses. The snow was falling harder now, fat flakes that covered everything in a blanket of white. By the time he finished his chores and came back inside, night had fallen and the house was quiet except for the crackling of the fire. He made himself some supper and sat at the table, listening to the sound of footsteps moving around upstairs. After a while, Rebecca came down wearing one of his mother's dresses, a simple blue calico that brought out the amber in her eyes. Her hair was clean and braided over one shoulder, and she looked almost peaceful. "Feel better?" Ethan asked. "Much better," she said. "Thank you for everything." "You are welcome," he said. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit with me for a while if you like, unless you would rather rest." Rebecca sat down, folding her hands in her lap. "I do not think I could sleep yet," she admitted. "My mind is too loud." "I understand that feeling," Ethan said. He poured her a cup of coffee and pushed it across the table. "After my parents died, I would lie awake for hours every night, thinking about everything I should have said or done differently." "What helped?" Rebecca asked. "Time," Ethan said, "and work." keeping my hands busy so my mind did not have as much space to wander, and eventually learning to forgive myself for being human. They talked for a long time that night, the conversation flowing easier than Ethan would have expected. Rebecca told him about growing up in Ohio, the youngest of 5 sisters, and how she had dreamed of adventure and romance when she met Tom Morris. How he had swept her off her feet with promises of a life in the West, of building something together, of being partners. "He made me feel special," she said quietly. "Like I was the only woman in the world who mattered. And then after the wedding it was like a switch flipped. Suddenly nothing I did was right. I cooked wrong, I cleaned wrong, I talked wrong. And when I could not get pregnant, he started saying I was broken, defective, that he should have married one of my sisters instead. 'You are not broken,' Ethan said with quiet intensity, 'and the failure to have children might just as easily have been his fault as yours. But either way, it does not define your worth as a person.' I wish I had met someone like you instead," Rebecca said, then immediately flushed. "I am sorry, that was inappropriate." "It was honest," Ethan said. He reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I am glad you are here, Rebecca. Even if the circumstances that brought you here were terrible, I am glad our paths crossed." She looked down at their joined hands, and he saw her eyes shimmer with fresh tears. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered. "How to trust again. How to believe that kindness can exist without strings attached. One day at a time," Ethan said. "I am not going anywhere, and neither are you until you are ready. We have got all the time in the world." The days that followed fell into a gentle rhythm. Ethan woke early each morning to tend to the animals and do his ranch work, while Rebecca slowly began to find her place in the household. She insisted on earning her keep, despite his protests, and threw herself into cooking and cleaning and mending. The house began to transform under her care, becoming warmer and more welcoming. She was a good cook, better than Ethan by far, and he found himself looking forward to mealtimes with an anticipation that had nothing to do with hunger. They would sit together at the table and talk about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their pasts, discussing books they had read, debating whether the new railroad line would be good or bad for Salida. Ethan was careful to give her space, to not crowd her or make her feel pressured. But he found himself watching her when she was not looking, memorizing the way she laughed at something funny, the way she hummed while she worked, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking hard about something. Rebecca seemed to be healing, the shadows under her eyes fading, her smiles coming more easily. She gained weight, filling out the dresses she wore, and her hair grew shiny and thick. But sometimes, Ethan would catch her staring out the window with a faraway expression, and he wondered what she was thinking about. It was 3 weeks after she arrived that things began to change between them. Ethan had been out mending fences in the far pasture when a sudden storm blew in, catching him by surprise. He barely made it back to the house before the full force of the blizzard hit, stumbling through the door half frozen and covered in ice. Rebecca took one look at him and sprang into action, helping him out of his frozen coat and boots, wrapping him in blankets, making him sit by the fire while she heated water for tea. Her hands were gentle but efficient as she checked him for frostbite, her brow furrowed with concern. "You scared me," she said quietly. "When you did not come back and the storm started, I thought something terrible had happened." "I am fine," Ethan said, though his teeth were chattering. "Just got caught out longer than I meant to." "You are not fine," Rebecca said firmly. "You are half frozen." "What were you thinking, staying out there so long?" "I was thinking about you," Ethan admitted before he could stop himself. The cold must have loosened his tongue, or maybe it was the way she was looking at him, her eyes full of worry and something else he could not quite name. I was thinking about how I wanted to get the fence fixed so the horses would be safe, and then I could come back here to you and maybe we could play chess again like we did last night." Rebecca went very still. "Ethan," she said softly. "I know," he said. "I know it is too soon. I know you are still healing from what he did to you. But I cannot help how I feel, Rebecca. These past few weeks with you here, it is like the house has come back to life. Like I have come back to life." "I feel it too," she whispered. "But I am scared. What if I am broken the way Tom said? What if I cannot give you children? What if I am not enough?" Ethan reached out and cupped her face in his hands, looking directly into her eyes. "You are enough," he said. "You are more than enough, and I do not care about children. I mean, if we have them someday, that would be wonderful. But if we do not, that would be wonderful too, because I would still have you." "We?" Rebecca asked, and there was hope in her voice. "If you want there to be a we," Ethan said, "I would like there to be a we. I would like to court you proper, take you to church socials and barn dances, let everyone in town know that you are my girl. And then, when you are ready, I would like to marry you and spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, but these were different from the tears she had cried when she first arrived. These were tears of joy and relief, and something that looked a lot like love. "I would like that too," she said. "I would like that very much." Ethan leaned forward and kissed her, soft and gentle, a question more than a demand. Rebecca kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, and Ethan felt his heart crack open in the best possible way. They took things slow after that, building their relationship on a foundation of friendship and trust. Ethan courted Rebecca the way she deserved to be courted, with flowers picked from the meadow behind the house, with compliments that made her blush, with patient hands that never took more than she was willing to give. In February, he took her to the Valentine's Day dance at the town hall. Rebecca wore a new dress she had made from fabric Ethan bought her in town, a deep red that made her look like a flame. They danced every dance together, and Ethan did not miss the way the other men looked at her with appreciation, or the way Rebecca smiled up at him like he was the only person in the room. Harold Simmons from the general store pulled Ethan aside at one point during the evening. "That is some woman you have got there," he said approvingly. "She has got the whole town talking, the way she has transformed your place. Emma says she stopped by last week and barely recognized the house, said it looked like a real home again." "She is special," Ethan agreed, his eyes never leaving Rebecca where she stood talking with some of the other women from town. "You going to make an honest woman of her?" Harold asked with a knowing smile. "If she will have me," Ethan said. "I am waiting for the right moment to ask." The right moment came in March, when the snow finally began to melt and the first green shoots started pushing up through the earth. Ethan and Rebecca were working in the garden together, turning over the soil and planning what to plant. The sun was warm on Ethan's shoulders, and Rebecca's laugh floated through the air like music. "I want to plant roses," she was saying. "Right there by the porch, red ones and yellow ones and white ones all mixed together." "Then we will plant roses," Ethan said. He straightened up and wiped his hands on his trousers, his heart suddenly pounding. "Rebecca, can I ask you something?" She looked up at him, shading her eyes against the sun. "Of course." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring that had belonged to his mother, a simple gold band with a small diamond. "I know we have not known each other very long," he said, "but I also feel like I have known you my whole life. You make me laugh and you make me think and you make every single day better just by being in it. I love you, Rebecca Morris. Will you marry me?" Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth and tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling, the biggest smile Ethan had ever seen. "Yes," she said. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger and then he picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her properly, pouring all his love and hope and dreams into it. They were married in April, in a simple ceremony at the church in Salida. Rebecca wore a white dress she had sewn herself, with lace at the collar and cuffs, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Ethan had picked that morning. The whole town turned out for the wedding, and afterward there was a party at the ranch that lasted until well after dark. That night, alone in their bedroom for the first time as husband and wife, Ethan was gentle with Rebecca, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and loved and cherished. She cried afterward, but when he asked if he had hurt her, she shook her head. "These are happy tears," she said. "I did not know it could be like this. I did not know it could be beautiful." "It will always be beautiful with us," Ethan promised. "Because we love each other, and that makes all the difference." The months that followed were the happiest of Ethan's life. He and Rebecca worked the ranch together, partners in every sense of the word. She learned to ride horses and help with the cattle, and he learned to appreciate the small touches she added to their home. The flowers on the table, the curtains that actually matched, the way she organized his tools so he could find them. In July, Rebecca came to him one evening as he was sitting on the porch watching the sun set. She had a strange expression on her face, something between joy and fear. "Ethan," she said, sitting down beside him, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" he asked, immediately concerned. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," she said. "Better than fine, I am pregnant." Ethan felt like all the air had been knocked out of his lungs. "Pregnant," he repeated stupidly. "I saw the doctor in town today," Rebecca said. "He confirmed it. We are going to have a baby, Ethan." "But Tom said you were barren," Ethan said, still trying to process this information. "I guess Tom was wrong," Rebecca said, and there was a fierce satisfaction in her voice. "Or maybe it was Tom who had the problem all along. Either way, we are having a baby." Ethan let out a whoop of joy and gathered her into his arms, holding her tight. "I cannot believe it," he said. "We are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Rebecca asked, and he could hear the vulnerability in her question. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Ethan said. "I am over the moon. I am walking on air. I am the luckiest man who ever lived." The pregnancy was not easy. Rebecca was sick every morning for the first few months, and Ethan held her hair back and brought her crackers and tea and did whatever he could to make her comfortable. As she grew bigger, she got uncomfortable and irritable, but Ethan thought she had never been more beautiful. In February of 1880, on a cold, clear night with stars scattered across the sky like diamonds, Rebecca went into labor. Ethan sent for the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Henderson, and then he paced the downstairs while Rebecca labored upstairs, listening to her cries and feeling utterly helpless. It took 12 hours, but finally he heard a new sound, the thin wail of a baby crying. Ethan raced up the stairs and burst into the room, finding Rebecca propped up against the pillows looking exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "It is a boy," she said, smiling at him through tears. "We have a son, Ethan." Ethan approached the bed slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at his child for the first time. The baby had a shock of dark hair and his eyes were squeezed shut, his little fists waving in the air. He was perfect. "Can I hold him?" Ethan asked. Rebecca carefully transferred the baby into his arms, and Ethan stood there feeling the weight of this tiny life, this person who was half him and half the woman he loved more than anything. "Hello there, little one," he said softly. "I am your papa. And I promise you, I am going to do everything I can to be the kind of father you deserve." "What should we name him?" Rebecca asked. They had discussed names before, but had never quite settled on one. Ethan looked down at his son, thinking about his own father, the man who had taught him what it meant to be good and strong and kind. "What about Edward?" he suggested. "After my father. Edward Morris Edwards." "Edward," Rebecca repeated, testing out the name. "I like it. Edward Morris Edwards." "Eddie for short," Ethan said, and the baby yawned. A huge yawn that seemed too big for his tiny face. The years that followed were full and rich. Eddie grew from a baby into a toddler, then a rambunctious little boy with his mother's amber eyes and his father's stubborn chin. He followed Ethan everywhere, chattering constantly, asking a million questions about everything he saw. In 1882, Rebecca gave birth to a daughter they named Alina, a quiet, serious baby who watched everything with wide eyes. 2 years after that, another son arrived, this one named Ernest, who came out screaming and barely stopped for the first 6 months of his life. The ranch prospered under Ethan and Rebecca's joint care. They expanded the herd, bought more land, hired a few ranch hands to help with the work. Rebecca started a garden that became the envy of the county, growing vegetables and herbs, and those roses she had wanted, which bloomed every summer in a riot of color. They had hard times too, of course. There was the winter when half the herd died in a blizzard, and the summer when a drought nearly broke them, and the time Eddie fell out of the hayloft and broke his arm. But they faced everything together, Ethan and Rebecca, partners in the truest sense. Sometimes, usually late at night when the children were asleep and they had the house to themselves, Ethan would look at Rebecca and marvel at how his life had turned out. That cold December day when she had stumbled off the stagecoach seemed like a lifetime ago, but he remembered it clearly, remembered the way his heart had known before his head did that this woman was going to change everything. "What are you thinking about?" Rebecca would ask, catching him staring at her. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Ethan would say. "I am thinking about how you arrived through snow and tears, and I got to be the one who wiped both away. I am thinking about how I promised to give you a home, and instead you gave me one." "We gave each other a home," Rebecca would correct him, taking his hand. "That is what love does, Ethan. It creates a place where two people can be themselves completely, where they can be safe and seen and chosen every single day." In 1890, Eddie turned 10 years old, and Ethan taught him how to break horses the gentle way, with patience and kindness instead of force. Alina was 8 and already reading at a level far beyond her years, spending hours in the little library they had built in the parlor. Ernest was 6 and wild as a March hare, always getting into some kind of trouble. That summer, they had a letter from Rebecca's family in Ohio, saying that her father had died. Rebecca cried for days, mourning not just her father but the lost years, the relationship that had been broken when she married Tom Morris and moved away. Ethan held her while she grieved, and when she said she wanted to name their next child after her father, he agreed without hesitation. Their fourth child, another boy they named Robert, was born in the spring of 1891. He was a happy baby who smiled at everyone, and Eddie and Alina and Ernest all doted on him, fighting over who got to hold him. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. They celebrated birthdays and Christmases, survived illnesses and injuries, watched their children grow and change. Ethan's hair started to go gray at the temples, and Rebecca got laugh lines around her eyes from smiling so much. In 1895, Eddie turned 15 and started courting a girl from town, a sweet thing named Sarah who blushed whenever Eddie looked at her. Watching his son fall in love reminded Ethan of his own courtship with Rebecca, and it made his heart feel full and tender. "He has got it bad," Rebecca said one evening, watching Eddie moon over a letter from Sarah. "He comes by it honestly," Ethan said, pulling her close. His father is still crazy about his mother after all these years. Only crazy, Rebecca teased. Not madly in love, not desperately devoted. All of those things, Ethan said, kissing her temple. Every single one of those things and more. They were sitting on the porch watching the sun set, something they did almost every evening when the weather was nice. The ranch stretched out before them, the fields green and lush, the cattle grazing peacefully, the mountains rising purple and majestic in the distance. This was the life they had built together, stone by stone and day by day, and it was good. You ever think about that day? Rebecca asked quietly. The day I arrived, all the time, Ethan admitted. I think about how close I came to not being there. I almost went to Denver that week to buy breeding stock, but I changed my mind at the last minute. If I had gone, I would not have been there when you needed help. Someone else would have found you, or maybe no one would have, and our whole life together would never have happened. I do not like to think about that, Rebecca said, shuddering. I do not know what I would have done if you had not been there. I was so lost, Ethan, so broken. I did not think I would ever feel whole again. But you did, Ethan said. We both did. We healed each other. We did, Rebecca agreed. She was quiet for a moment, then said, I want to tell you something I have never told you before. All right, Ethan said, curious. When I first got off that stagecoach, I was not just running from Tom, Rebecca said. I was running from life. I had decided that if I could not find somewhere safe to stay that night, I was going to walk out into the snow and just let the cold take me. I did not want to fight anymore. I did not want to hurt anymore. I was ready to give up. Ethan felt his throat tighten. Rebecca. But then you were there, she continued, her voice thick with emotion. And you looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth saving. And when you wiped away my tears and called me your love, even though we had just met, something inside me decided to hold on for one more day, just to see what would happen. I am so glad you did, Ethan said, his own eyes stinging with tears. I am so glad you gave us a chance. Me too, Rebecca said. She turned to look at him, the setting sun painting her face in shades of gold and amber. You saved my life that day, Ethan. In every way a person can be saved. You gave me hope and love and a reason to keep going. You gave me a family and a home and a future. You gave me everything. You gave me everything too, Ethan said. Before you, I was just going through the motions, working the ranch because it was what I knew how to do, but not really living. You taught me how to live again. You taught me how to love. They sat there holding hands as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and the stars began to come out. From inside the house, they could hear the children laughing about something. Eddie's deeper voice mixing with Aliner's light one, and Ernest's loud guffaw and baby Robert's delighted giggle. We made a good life, Rebecca said softly. We made the best life, Ethan corrected her. As the years continued to roll by, Eddie married his Sarah in 1898 and brought her to live on the ranch in a little house Ethan built for them on the far side of the property. Aliner went away to teachers' college in Denver, writing long letters home about her studies and the books she was reading. Ernest showed a talent for working with horses and started a side business training them for other ranchers in the area. Robert, the baby, grew into a quiet, thoughtful boy who loved to draw and paint. Ethan and Rebecca grew older together, their hair turning white, their bodies slowing down, but their love never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experiences and mutual respect, and the kind of intimacy that only comes from truly knowing another person. In 1905, Eddie and Sarah had their first child, a little girl with Rebecca's amber eyes. Ethan held his granddaughter for the first time and felt tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by the continuity of it all, the way life kept going on, generation after generation. "What are you going to name her?" he asked Eddie. "We are thinking Rose," Eddie said, glancing at his wife for confirmation. "After the roses Mama always loved." Rebecca, standing next to Ethan, let out a soft sob of joy. "That is perfect," she said. "That is absolutely perfect." More grandchildren followed. Alina came home from Denver with a husband, a professor named Daniel, and they had twin boys. Ernest married a rancher's daughter named Caroline, and they had 4 children in quick succession. Robert moved to Colorado Springs to pursue his art, but came home often, bringing stories of the city and the gallery that was showing his paintings. Ethan and Rebecca became the heart of their growing family, the center around which everyone else orbited. Their house was always full of noise and laughter, grandchildren running through the rooms, meals that required 2 tables to seat everyone. They loved it, loved being surrounded by the evidence of the life they had created together. On a warm summer evening in 1910, Ethan and Rebecca celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together everyone they loved. Their children and grandchildren were there, along with friends from town, neighboring ranchers, everyone who had been part of their journey. As the sun began to set and people started to head home, Ethan and Rebecca found themselves alone on the porch again, just like they had been so many times before. Rebecca was 62 now, her hair completely white, her face lined with age but still beautiful to Ethan. He was 68, his body worn from years of hard work, but his love for this woman as strong as it had been that first day. 30 years, Rebecca said wonderingly. "It feels like it has been both forever and no time at all." "I would do it all again," Ethan said. "Every single day, every single moment, I would do it all again exactly the same way." "Even the hard parts?" Rebecca asked. "Especially the hard parts," Ethan said. "Because the hard parts taught us how to be strong. They taught us how to hold on to each other when everything else was falling apart." Rebecca leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over the years. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" she asked. "When I got off the stage coach." "I said, 'Welcome home, my love,'" Ethan replied immediately. He had never forgotten those words, the way they had come out of him without thought or planning, straight from his heart. "I did not understand it then," Rebecca said. "I thought you were crazy or maybe just being kind." "But you were right, Ethan. I was home. I just did not know it yet." "We were both home," Ethan said. "Because home is not a place, it is a person. And you are my home, Rebecca. You always have been and you always will be." They sat there together as the night deepened around them, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. The ranch was quiet except for the sounds of crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. Inside the house, their children and grandchildren were cleaning up from the party, their voices drifting out through the open windows. Ethan thought about the young man he had been when Rebecca first arrived, lonely and lost without really knowing it. He thought about the broken woman who had stumbled off that stagecoach, convinced she had no future. And he marveled at how life could change in an instant, how one decision to help a stranger could lead to everything that mattered. "I love you," he said to Rebecca, words he had said thousands of times over the years but which never lost their meaning. "I love you too," she replied, just as she always did. "Thank you for saving me." "Thank you for letting me," Ethan said. The years after that were slower, gentler. Ethan and Rebecca handed over most of the ranch work to Eddie and Ernest, content to sit on their porch and watch their grandchildren play in the yard. They took walks together every evening, hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. They read books aloud to each other, played cards, tended Rebecca's beloved roses. In 1915, Ethan woke up one morning and knew, in the way that old people sometimes know, that his time was getting short. His heart had been giving him trouble for a while, and the doctor had told him to take it easy, but he was not afraid. He had lived a full life, a good life, and he had loved and been loved in return. What more could a man ask for? But he had one more year, one more beautiful year with Rebecca. They spent it well, savoring every moment, every conversation, every shared meal and sunset and quiet morning. Ethan made sure all his affairs were in order, that the ranch would go to his sons, that Rebecca would be taken care of. He told each of his children and grandchildren that he loved them, that he was proud of them, that they should live their lives with kindness and courage. In March of 1916, Ethan had a heart attack while sitting on his beloved porch. Rebecca was beside him, as she had been for 36 years. She held his hand and stroked his face and told him it was all right to let go. "I do not want to leave you," Ethan said, his voice weak. "I will be along soon enough," Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face but her voice steady. "And until then, I will hold you in my heart every single day. You made my life worth living, Ethan Edwards. You gave me everything I never knew I needed." "Welcome home, my love," Ethan whispered, the last words he ever spoke, and then he closed his eyes and was gone. Rebecca mourned him deeply, but she did not break. She was stronger than that, forged by the life they had lived together. She stayed on the ranch, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, tending her roses and sitting on the porch where she and Ethan had spent so many hours together. She lived for 5 more years, and when she died in her sleep in 1921 at the age of 73, her family buried her next to Ethan on the hill overlooking the ranch. On her gravestone, below her name and dates, they carved the words Ethan had spoken to her that first day. "Welcome home, my love." The ranch stayed in the family for generations, passed down from parents to children, a testament to the love story that had started on a cold December day in 1878. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind was just right, people swore they could see 2 figures sitting on the old porch, holding hands and watching the sunset, together forever in the place they had built with love and tears and hope and unwavering devotion to each other. Their story became legend in Salida, a reminder that sometimes the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures, that kindness matters, that love can heal even the deepest wounds. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren grew up hearing about how their ancestors had met, how a cowboy had seen a woman in need and had offered her everything without asking for anything in return, how that single act of compassion had blossomed into a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. The roses Rebecca had planted so long ago continued to bloom every summer, red and yellow and white, a living memorial to a woman who had arrived through snow and tears, and had stayed to build a life full of joy and laughter and love. And every year on the anniversary of that first meeting, the family would gather at the ranch to tell the story again, to remember Ethan and Rebecca and the beautiful legacy they had left behind. Because that is what true love does. It does not just change the people who experience it. It ripples out through time and space, touching everyone it encounters, creating beauty and hope and possibility. Ethan Edwards had not known when he saw that broken woman stumbling off the stage coach that he was looking at his future, his partner, the great love of his life. But his heart had known, and he had listened to it, and that had made all the difference. The Wild West was a hard place, a place of danger and uncertainty and struggle. But it was also a place where miracles could happen, where 2 souls could find each other against all odds and create something lasting and true. Ethan and Rebecca's story was proof of that, a testament to the power of love to transform lives and heal wounds, and create families that would endure for generations. As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple, the ranch that Ethan and Rebecca had built together stood strong and proud, a monument to their love. The house was full of their descendants, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their blood and their legacy. The land was rich and fertile, cared for with the same dedication and love that Ethan and Rebecca had shown. And somewhere beyond the veil that separates this life from the next, two souls walked hand in hand through fields of eternal spring, their love unbroken by death, their connection as strong as it had been in life. They had found their forever home in each other, and nothing, not time or distance or even death itself, could change that. The story of Ethan Edwards and Rebecca Morris was not just a story about two people who fell in love. It was a story about hope and redemption, about second chances and the courage to trust again after being broken. It was about choosing kindness even when the world seems cruel, about seeing the worth in another person when they cannot see it themselves. It was about building something beautiful out of pain and loss and fear. And it all started with a simple act of compassion on a cold December day, when a cowboy saw a woman in need and decided to help, not because he expected anything in return, but because it was the right thing to do. That decision changed two lives and created a legacy that would last forever. A reminder that love is always worth fighting for, always worth believing in, always worth choosing over and over again. Their story lived on in the hearts of everyone who heard it, inspiring new generations to be brave and kind and open to the possibilities that life offers. Because you never know when your moment will come, when the person who will change your life forever will stumble into it, broken and hurting and desperate for hope. And when that moment comes, the choice you make matters more than you can possibly imagine. Ethan Edwards made the right choice that December day in 1878, and because of it, he and Rebecca Morris got to live a love story for the ages. A beautiful, messy, imperfect, wonderful life together that neither of them could have imagined when they first met. They got to grow old together, to raise children and watch grandchildren be born, to face hardships and celebrate triumphs, to learn and grow and change together. They got to be home to each other, and in the end, that is what mattered most. Not the ranch or the money or the legacy they left behind, though all of those things were important. What mattered was the love they shared, the way they chose each other every single day, the way they held on tight through storms and sunshine alike. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky above the ranch, shining bright and eternal, it was easy to imagine Ethan and Rebecca among them, their love immortalized in the cosmos, a light that would never go out. They had made their mark on the world, not through great deeds or famous accomplishments, but through the simple, profound act of loving each other well. And that, in the end, was the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind. Not wealth or fame or power, but love that endured, that transformed, that created ripples of goodness spreading out through time. Ethan and Rebecca had loved well, and in doing so, they had changed the world in ways both large and small, starting with that moment when a cowboy wiped away a stranger's tears and whispered words that would echo through the decades. "Welcome home, my love."